to another Facehammer Advent show, and in the show, Byron Order is going to talk us through the best Stormcast allies for Order.
Yeah, absolutely.
Where's your waistcoat? Where's your waistcoat?
I've forgotten it. Actually, I do have my dragon next to me for no particularly good reason that I ran in my order list. It's just on my desk looking sweet. So I'm definitely not the most qualified Stormcast player of the podcast, but I 100% am the most qualified Janky Allies user on the podcast. So I'm going to hit you with my my top 5 allies from the Stormcast Eternal Battletome, and that is a massively wide open, varied book of fairly heavily armored, somewhat elite dudes. And that really fills in a huge amount of gaps for a large proportion of the armies within Order. And I've got some kind of touchstones that I've used a lot in various lists. And I think people may be used to seeing the Prime as an ally, the really sexy, different, funky, flying, dropping from the sky stuff. However, there are some absolute utility beasts that I think are really easily overlooked and can be great additions. Also, a load of these models are just great to paint, and you can make them fit anything really easily. They're also pretty cheap, both in points and in money. So, why not fill your boots? So let's start from the bottom with an absolutely kind of vanilla, unexciting, completely overlooked, in my opinion, choice, and that is the Humble Liberator. So, amazing. I just don't know why people don't ally these. So many armies, particularly in Order, are like literally in their pants. They got a 5-up or a 6-up save, 1 wound each. You're going to have 10 of them, and if they take a heavy battle shock, it's bad or whatever. And you can just ally in these guys for, I believe, 90 points for 5 of them. Yeah. They just exist. They're pretty solid. I mean, Les, you'll be able to speak to their abilities better than me. Their shields comes into it more than people think. They're 4-up save, rerolling ones.
Yeah, great. I think they're one of those units that's got a lot of the rules on the Warscroll standard, so they're not reliant on synergy. So where a lot of armies, they say, oh, you need all this synergy to make that unit pop, the strength for Stormcast, they don't rely on that synergy. The scrolls are just good. So
I think one of the things with Liberators as well is that they got a little bump when this Stormcast book was released. They went from Bravery 6 to 7, I believe, which is like the fact that you've got 5 models and their Bravery 7 is really good, like multi-wound models. Getting them in cover, 3-up save, rolling ones, on an objective. They die to anything. I mean, they die quite easily to people who put an appropriate amount of effort into killing them, but 9 times out of 10, they're not putting the appropriate amount of effort into killing them. They're focusing on the sexy parts of the army.
Yeah, they're underrated by the people who would be taking them and the people who would be playing them. So just to run through the meat and potatoes of what I think makes them special, as Russ touched on, there's a lot of stuff on their profile. So they've got Lolo the Tyrant. So if an enemy from this model is attacking an enemy unit with 5 wounds characteristic of 5 or more, you can add 1 to the model's hit rolls in the combat phase. Just sweet. If you're fighting some big stuff, that's great. Reroll save rolls of 1 for this unit. It's not in the melee phase, it's just reroll saves of 1, and you've got a 4+ save and 2 wounds each. That's brilliant. And the champion, or not specifically the champion, but 1 model in 5 can take a Grand Hammer or a Grand Blade, and so often a melee unit, the champion's got 1 extra attack or something, and these are actually pretty solid weapons. Rend 1, damage 2, something like that. So I think they're a great addition if you're playing Deepkin or something like that, and you just wanted something more resilient than a Thrall to stand on your backline for barely any points. They are a super solid choice. So that is my number 5. And I think one thing to bear in mind with the Stormcast is the book is so varied that whatever your army doesn't do in Order, you just pick something that does do that. So if you have an army that doesn't reach out and touch your opponent, I'm talking with shooting, not inappropriately, then a Celestar Ballista.
Thanks for that clarification, Byron.
I mean, if you can scare your opponent metaphorically, then go for it. It's all part of the game, isn't it? So the Celestar Ballista is a fantastic option for that. So if you don't have the shooting, then this beast is 120 points, I believe. It's got a move value that people always forget with artillery. It's got a move value of 4, and then a potential range of 36 with one of its types of shots, or 18-inch with its other type of shot. So you got a massive amount of reach out and touch, anything on the table pretty much ability. It's got a 4+ save, 7 wounds. It gets a bonus in cover, which makes it more indestructible. So you could be on an objective, scoring, being way more resilient than anything like this has any right to be, and killing something on your opponent's objectives with the flexibility to shoot it in this way or in this way. It's just it's a really, really solid, and it can spike. It can really, really spike as well.
I think that's a key point when you look at units is there's damage potential and an average damage, and like I was saying this about long strikes against Hurricane crossbows. So like Hurricane crossbows, you roll like 27 dice, whereas the long strikes you roll 6 dice. You're only ever going to do 12 wounds, but the Hurricanes could do 27 wounds. Bit unlikely, but you could. Whereas you can only do 12 with long strikes. So I think it's an interest. I really like the spikiness of it because sometimes it will just go nuts.
I can remember playing Liam Cook when he had them allied into his daughter's army, and like one game they were just really lackluster, and then the other game they just decimated. You never know. It's rolling 6s, right? So that's the thing. If you roll those 6s, it explodes on a hit, doesn't it? When they hit, I can't remember the exact rules for them.
Yeah, so you can, if they're in shorter range, you get more attacks. So rather than 1 and putting all your eggs in one basket that is a 3 to hit basket, you can have 4 attacks on a 5 to hit.
That was it.
3s to wound. Rend 2, that's great. Some Order armies don't have access to that, period, never mind at range. So I think it's just a really solid way to do it, and it's a nice points value at like 10 or 20 more points. I wouldn't consider it, but I think it's
it's 110 points just for clarity. So I know it's moved around a bit. So
no worries, 110. So super solid.
Did you pop the Ordinator in this category as well?
I did, yeah. And the reason for that is if you do have shooting from war machines of yours that you would like to buff, so it's kind of a whichever one floats your boat depending on your army. I don't think many people realise, especially when it came out, the Lord Ordinator, he buffs Order war machines within 6, not wholly within 6. So that is any war machine from any Order army. He adds 1 to the hit roll, which is amazing. So if you've got Hellstorm rocket batteries or any type of cannon or some of the dwarf stuff,
it's stuff with the war machine keyword, isn't it? So it even affects Kradron boats.
Yep, I think like maybe even gyrocopters or stuff like that as well. There's some stuff that sneaks through. So if rather than wanting some shooting on a buff your shooting, you could take use of those depending what goes on. So we're moving from number 4, both of them, to number 3. And rather than offensive power, I think this one's gone for defensive power. But as we're going to touch on with the Stormcast heroes, all of them survive better than you would think they would. And Order is lacking in resilient wizards. This is a resilient wizard. It's also a resilient wizard with a Dispel Scroll, which is just some armies cannot take a certain scenario being thrown at them, and this just says no to that once in a game, which can be all you need to win or to not lose.
So for people wondering, that's one automatic unbind when we say Dispel Scroll, because that's something back from 8th edition,
old school
Warhammer. So it's an ability on their Warscroll which allows you to automatically unbind an enemy spell once per battle.
So I use the Encounter quite a lot over the years, and he always overperforms in combat. People underestimate what you can do in combat because of the rend and the D3 damage.
Yeah, 3 attacks, 3s and 3s, rend 1, damage D3, and then you also get to go ahead, Les, because I know you like this one.
I love this is one that people again don't see coming. It's the splash the vials on himself, so he takes a mortal wound on himself, and depending on the size of the enemy unit, can do D3 mortals,
or herself, because I've got a picture of the female model.
The female one.
Sorry,
So it's
there's two. There's a male model and a female model. So.
Yeah, there's the one with the like that, isn't there?
Yeah.
So one of the things that people didn't ever see coming is when you've got 2 units close together. It's within 3 inches, I believe. The splash from the vial.
Yeah.
So you charge into one unit. You'd splash the vials on yourself, take 3 mortal wounds, but you're within 3 inches of 2 units. So both of those big units would then take D3 mortals each. For each spell that you splash, so you'd basically go 3d3 mortals on that unit, 3d3 mortals on that unit, and it was a throwaway moment for me to damage potential units coming in to clear my backline. So I'd use it to kill. I can remember using it against Ard boys, going in 3d3 mortals, which then meant that when they did eventually come into my line of liberators, they're already damaged to the point where they're more manageable when they come in. I mean, it's still a bit dicey, but I do think that people don't see that coming because it's every unit within 3 inches. You want it to be away from your own units when you do it as well, because it affects the Stormcast units as well. So
pretty solid as a Lone Ranger. It's worth noting it's at the once per battle at the start of the combat phase, not your combat phase. So you can activate this and then pile it in or other units in and get them then within 3 if you want to. But 3d3 mortals, that's at least 3 mortals minimum. That is really reliable. That's better than most spells that you have access to. And you then get to back it up with some nice solid attacks. It's a wizard. It's a character with a 3-up save. It's a wizard with a 3-up save and 5 wounds. Pretty solid. And it's just an absolute utility piece, and people do not ever expect it to be as survivable.
Do you have the scroll, the spell on its Warscroll? What's that spell?
Spirit Storm, a casting value of 7. If cast, each enemy unit within 18 suffers a mortal wound. In addition, until your next hero phase, subtract 1 from run and charge rolls for enemy units while they are within 18 of the caster. So quite a lot of general mortal wound output, which is just... It's always just a thing, isn't it?
Yeah. It's a great thing in most armies. You've got a wizard that can unbind, survive, do mortal wounds, and disrupt enemy charges. So it's a really good choice.
And he's a bit pokey to fight as well because of the amount of attacks plus the rend and the D3 damage. He usually goes into stuff on the objectives and like little 5-man units goes in and kills them. So
you got
2 of those is
points, Byron.
I've forgotten it. I think it was 120. It's got modified.
Was it one day? Yeah,
I thought it was 140, but
okay, they've been modified.
I might be wrong.
No worries.
Yeah, I'm going old money, so it might be that. It might have gone down.
It's a great option for taking 2 of them as well. You could just neglect to take any of your own casters from your own faction, and then take 2 of those. And I think it's a really solid option if you want to be more survivable, particularly for use in hero missions.
It's 120.
There we go. Ooh, 120. Sexy. Bargain. So moving from an elite wizard to one of the most crap non-resilient units in the Stormcast book, but an absolute just kind of a meme in terms of how useful it is for Order. That is the Aether Wings. I mean, they cost nothing. I believe is it 40 points?
I think they are very, very
something like that. Yeah, very
cheap, I think. Movement 12, and they can go and stand in the way or on objectives, and they are a drop. And I mean, that's it basically. It's one of the lowest costs in the game. Yeah.
Get in the way, put in front of units, make sure they pile in towards that because it's the closest model. Screen stuff.
Retreat and charge as well for the lols. That's just there on the scroll. So if they do survive somehow, you could get one guy to stand in the way or score an objective, and when you've got a move 12, that is so much more useful than it is otherwise. So plenty of people talk about these in KO, but I think that all of Order these are useful for. And then also note, you don't have to use those exact models if you've got a flock of Doom about or something like that. There are plenty of birdie things.
Tow things, hasn't he, to make him look like space drones. Things. I know Luke Morton did the spare bits from his Idnef Deepkin bases and used all of the fish as Aether Wings as well. So
absolutely. So I mean, there's not much to say about them. They do what they do, and they do it cheaply, and they do it effectively. And not every single army has access to that. Very few do, in fact. So just really, really useful.
One of the important rules, though, is the way it can move in the enemy charge phase, right? So
block charges. Yeah,
it's the rule is that at the start of the enemy charge phase, if this unit is wholly within 18 of a friendly unit of Vanguard Raptors, so unless you've got a unit of those as well, it can move 2d6. They must finish the move wholly within 18. So you can actually, if you were allying like a unit of Vanguard shooters and these, you could use their move to disrupt as well.
I think there's actually quite a lot of nice pairs of things you could take. We'll touch that when we talk about the things that didn't make the cut. But allying in 2 units from Stormcast is a really good option, particularly in City's armies. I think they've got more utility than perhaps any other army in Order for it. So the top spot. Now, this is mine. It's very particular to me. There's others that are probably objectively better. But in terms of just always wanting to fit one of these into every single list, I have put in spot number 1 the Knight Azeros, because I just think it's absolutely amazing. So he is a hero. He has a 3+ save, so in cover he has a 2+ save. He flies, move 12, 4 attacks, 3s, rend 1, damage 1, so not too much output. But the important thing is, and this was changed, you can reroll hit rolls of 1 for attacks made by friendly units that target enemy units while the enemy units are within 10 of this model. So he buffs your hits against the enemy, therefore anything in your army benefits as long as it's attacking something that is within 10 inches of him. Not wholly within, just within.
Just
so
10.
If you've got a drop from the Sky Army, it's not a particular type of attack, shooting, melee, whatever. If you've got some people who hit on 3s on the charge, and then like you can buff them, you can get people to 2s re-rolling 1s without spending a command point. He's also super quick and is a hero, so you get something that in some scenarios could be a real buff to the majority of your army, to kind of honing down and just nuking your opponent's army. Or in other games, he's just going to go and stand somewhere and be really, really annoying. Slightly awkwardly, he has a once per battle ability that is amazing, but has to be done in your hero phase. So the flip-flop with the double turn gets a little bit awkward. But essentially, once a battle, you can explode his Celestial Beacon, and each enemy unit within 8 of this model suffers D3 mortal wounds, Chaos suffered D6. So when that comes into things, it really does, but it's quite a difficult one to make happen. However, he's fairly survivable, so if he's standing around in terrain, your opponent's going to have to put way more into him to kill him than they would think.
Yeah, he's great. I love the Azeroth.
It's something that I've not used that much, but I do think the Warscroll itself is brilliant most of the time, because with the Celestial Vindicators I've been running, you reroll ones on the charge anyway. So it's I've never really used him, and in my old tournament list, I never really found a place for him because those spots were taken within Cantors and Herald.
Back in the old rules, he only did shooting, didn't he? So now in the new Battletome, they changed it to all, and it affects all order as well, which is
just so good. I mean, that's one of the best 100 points you could spend in any list. And so many lists, you write what you think you've got there, and then you might only have 120 point characters, and you would like both to be able to buff your army and have a better chance in hero missions. Tick, 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 tick does all of that.
For 100 points, he's just so fast, so survivable. You look at him you look at some armies that don't have particularly, resilient characters, and you're like, most things in there it can take Stormcast as allies, right? So, I'm sure there's some that can't, but you'd think that you just slot in that 100-point Stormcast ally there, right? For what he is now, he's just very survivable, particularly for those hero missions, because there's always a hero mission at a tournament. And if you've already got 2 heroes, you're like,
Deepkin.
It's a 12-inch move, being able to get on that objective turn 1 without even risking a command point burn for a run roll or something like that as well.
Yeah.
It's a beast. On the side to that, though, do be willing to burn a 6 on his roll to turn 1, get your entire army, re-rolling 1s against your opponent's front line. It is devastatingly effective, and people don't see it coming. So that's the full rundown. Kind of honourable mention to the Prime, who is what he is, this absolute beatstick, and then also the Heraldor, but he kind of gets a doubling up if you take another Stormcast unit, because he can give them run and charge. So particularly in mixed order, if you're taking a unit of something and him, and you can get more allies in easily, or even have them as part of your army in free cities, then I think he's a really solid choice too.
Yeah, I think multiple Heraldors are quite good. Like you said, either like 2s or even 3s, if you particularly with the amount of density of terrain on the table these days for the Mortal Wound Toot. It's just, I always found that was really good. I know there was a lot of people taking sort of like 4 Heraldors at one point, expecting, because when Sylvaneth were at the height of their power, because of all the woods that were on the table, it was just like brilliant. Like, you put your wood down, but everything's taking Mortal Wounds. So it's I do like the Heraldor. I mean, what about you, Russ? Whatever sort of like things do you think for Stormcast?
I think they've pretty much covered all of it. I mean, I'm a big fan of, let's say, the Azeroth is one of the main ones. I think it depends on what list you're playing. I looked at KO putting in Liberators, or even actually Prosecutors, because they can keep up with your boats and stuff. And they've actually, I mean, it's different army now because you've got the redeploy and stuff, but it's a unit of like flying Liberators. You get less, but they're faster, so that's one.
Remember, every list in the world had those Prosecutors with Javs, right, at one point.
Yeah, and the other thing as well, if you're using a shooting list and you're worried about alpha strikes from combat armies, then Gryph-hounds units as your screens, because if they drop within range, you can then, I think you can alert a unit to shoot. I don't know if it's Stormcast only, but I don't play Order, so it's not something I'm that familiar with. But I would say, if they allow you to shoot against, if it has to be a Stormcast unit to be warned, then probably not so good. But
It's yeah, that's true.
Sweet.
Yeah, I think there's some really good options there, Brian.
Yeah, they're absolutely amazing. So if you'd like us to tell you what you think the allies would be for a particular army, if you want some like Deepkin advice or something like that, or if you've got your own top 5, by all means do pop it down below. And then equally, we've still got plenty of days Christmas to go. So if you want us to cover allies for another faction or something like that, let us know, and we will get to your suggestion at some point later this month.
Cool. Thanks for watching. Hope you like it, and we'll see you tomorrow for another Age of Sigmas video. I'm going to use that every day now. So thanks, and we'll be back tomorrow.
See you, guys. Bye.